What are the challenges in your experience that prevent people from taking timely and proactive health behaviors?
If I'm feeling fine, why will I spend the money to get a preventive health checkup?
Nobody's going to understand
Absolutely.
migraine as a problem because it is invisible.
We all like to believe and convince ourselves that we are fine.
What could be some positive motivators for people to adopt good healthy choices?
There's a lot of social pressure as well to look and feel good.
How can we as individuals overcome this reluctance of taking care of ourselves?
If I'm perfectly fine, only then I'll be perfectly productive. I'm not somebody who clicks pictures of food before consuming it, but I see people around me doing that.
38% of Indians consume junk food, which is primarily fried food and processed food.
If I don't hand out the cash myself, I don't know how much money I'm spending. You know what? I need to run to the hospital.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Better Effect, where we decode human behavior for you. We are your host. I'm Dr. Tavleen Kaur, an educator by profession and a seeker by spirit.
I'm Dr. Sahiba Sahani, a marketing enthusiast and someone with deep passion for understanding how consumer behavior shapes the world around us.
Me and Saiba, we both are very excited to introduce our speaker for the day. Someone who has worked very closely with Mr. Bill Gates under the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Her amazing work in food and nutrition communications have transformed communities and advanced global well-being. So I'm very excited to introduce this inspirational change maker, Dr. Pooja Sehgal. Pooja, welcome to The Better Effect.
Thank you so much. Very, very glad to be here today.
Likewise.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Pooja. So, to begin with, why don't you tell our audiences about your career trajectory? How did you happen to kind of join the health space as you're in currently?
Sure. Life is serendipity for the most bit. And while we all start off with grand plans about where we'll start and where we'll end up, lots of things happen along the way. I did my engineering, I did my management. At some point, I did my PhD as well. But the whole idea really was just to get a decent career, to be able to sort of contribute. And I did that through technology, through my work in the banking industry as well. The social sector really happened with serendipity. And I got a chance to actually do a bit of a volunteering piece with my previous organization, the Royal Bank of Scotland. And as part of that, we used to look up to the Gates Foundation because there was such amazing work that the foundation was doing. And through some connections, it so happened that somebody reached out and said, hey, would you like to join the Gates Foundation? I said, oh, why not? However, at that time, I think there was very little clarity about the kind of work. While one knows the fact that the foundation predominantly works in the global health space. It's taken a few years to really understand the foundation initially, but then I did land up with working on the predominant work piece that we have in the healthcare space, which is largely focused on how do you get better healthcare services to people who are vulnerable, marginalized, who don't normally get the access. And as part of that, I think it's been a absolutely inspiring and hugely elevating learning journey for me so far. It's been 9 years with the foundation. Hope to have many, many more, and hope to seek a whole lot more. Like you said, you're a seeker. I think all of us are learning through all of these everyday opportunities in our careers, and the interactions that we have with people, both in terms of the intellectual researcher, the enabler community, but also a lot more from the people that we are hoping to be able to help and support in the long run. That's a long and winding introduction about how and where I am today.
Now it's worth the time, of course. Pooja, we are all aware, the beautiful and inspiring work that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is doing, and we are really honored to have you. So, Pooja, you're someone who has worked at the grassroots levels, especially in the health space. So, people take their health for granted, right? They assume that nothing's going to happen to me. They ignore the early health signs. So, what are the challenges in your experience that prevent people from taking timely and proactive health behaviors?
I think there are many. One is, of course, the fact, like you rightly said, that if you're in a particular space, health wise, fitness wise, we assume that that's how we will continue to be. Case in point, people don't buy life insurance, people don't buy health insurance because we just assume. It's very hard to actually project yourself out in the future and say, "Hey, I'm going to be sick or I'm going to be unwell," right? We see that around us, but it's very hard to bring that to ourselves as an individual. The second reason I think is also access. How easily is health available to me? How easily can I get healthcare services? Is it like right by my doorstep, or do I have to travel a couple of kilometers, miles, drive down, etc.? Sort of like if you have a gym close by, the probability that you will get into a bit of a fitness routine is far greater than if you actually had to pick up a vehicle, a scooter, a bike, a car, and actually drive down. The other element is also the fact that nobody likes to be told that you're sick, right? So if I have to get my health checkup done, I've got to get needles inserted, I've got to go through an ECG. It's not necessarily the most pleasant experience, right? And that too, when I'm talking about the urban private sector best medical care sort of setups. If you go into the rural setups, however, if you have to wait long in lines, if you don't have the right kind of, say, medical service providers available at that time, it's the experience as well. Are you being warmly welcomed? You have to sit, sometimes stand for a long time. There's no water available, there's no loo available, things like that. It just makes it harder to actually access the services. And one more issue really is cost. India actually has a lot of out of pocket expenditure on healthcare from the individual. So the government of course spends a lot of money, but there is still a lot of out of pocket expenditure that people have to bear to get better healthcare services. So while there are lots of government programs trying to better that ratio and reduce the OOP burden on people at large, but it's still, if it's an expense, then what's the reason for me to make that expense? There has to be a good justification. If I'm feeling fine, why will I spend the money to get a preventive health checkup? Right? So the triggers for actual intervention in healthcare tend to be more like very visible symptoms or something is wrong with me. Right? We did a study once around Jaipur, and we had conversations with women to understand what does healthcare mean for them. And it just basically boiled down to, if I'm able to do my everyday things, I'm healthy, right? Now, within that, maybe there is pain, maybe there is some sort of,
Discomfort.
a discomfort, uneasiness, but you're ignoring that because you're able to do the things that you're supposed to do on a daily
We are
basis.
all guilty of that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's the triggers are harder. Healthcare in that sense is very different from a lot of other kind of services that we access, because we all like to believe and convince ourselves that we are fine, right? It's so much more easier to say, you know what, I'm okay, let me just carry on. I mean, when was the last time we had flu or a cough and said, oh, you know what, something, I need to run to the hospital? We don't do that. We say, I'll be fine, right? So the driver and the mentally convincing yourself that you're okay is very, very high, right? And one last thing I'd want to add is also some conditioning around us. Sort of like when we actually had these conversations about boys don't cry, there's a lot of conditioning, right? To say, you know what, you're supposed to be the protector, you're supposed to be strong. Much like even for ourselves, you say, you know what, it's a little pain, it'll go away, just deal with it. Just be strong. Why are you actually sort of complaining? Don't stop whining. So there's a lot of social pressure as well to look and feel good. And continue to deliver on the asks of you, both in urban as well as in rural settings.
Right.
You talked about, being culturally rooted in this kind of habit of ignoring. Do you think that culture has something to do, like maybe an Indian would push away their health concerns and would not be proactive, but let's say an American would probably be more proactive and visit the hospital even at the slightest of pain?
Again, a lot of conditioning. What is your ecosystem like, right? We've having come out of scarcity as a nation, and going through all of the challenges we did before independence, And we are actually sort of called out for jugaad and the ability to get things done and resource constrained settings as well, right? So in those settings, then preventive healthcare is almost like a luxury, right? It's not a basic want, because if I actually am a daily wage earner and maybe I earn say 500 rupees a day, if I actually go to a hospital or a healthcare center, I'm spending maybe 2-3 hours there. I'm actually foregoing that 500 rupees earning for that day. And if my everyday expense is dependent on my everyday earning, then I can't afford to do that. Right? If I have a family waiting for me and those 500 rupees will feed my family, then I'll push away the health concern, right? Also, like I said earlier, access, right? So if the healthcare comes to me, and that's what the government is doing in India, right? You have rural healthcare, ASHA workers going door to door and things like that. But I have to also learn to prioritize it, no? Because I don't want to be seen as that as an imposition on me, but I need to see that as something that will enable me. So we are not always able to say, if I'm perfectly fine, only then I'll be perfectly productive, right? We are able to make that linkage with education, interestingly. We prioritize education a lot because we feel education is the root for our economic growth, which it is, right? But we don't link it to health as much, because education will only also happen if you're healthy, right? So good health becomes the basic foundation to be able to be educated, to be economically productive, to have a productive life, to have a prosperous life. But we tend to focus on these other elements and assume that we'll always be healthy. I
Pooja,
don't project myself out as
right. You-
70-year-old or 80-year-old at this point. I will get there. Hopefully, I won't die before that, but it's a hard one to do. Sorry, you were saying
Pooja,
something.
you mentioned that people avoid maybe doing annual health checkups because they feel as long as my daily chores are being done, I will be okay. And I think we also do that at workplace. Let's say, I was reading a research paper the other day where the author talks about invisible illness like migraine, like diabetes, right, like arthritis. Now, I might need a break, but I'm still working because people will not understand it is still an illness because it is invisible. Diabetes is not visible, migraine is not visible. So I think I totally, we resonate with you, and we are all guilty of uh, going to workplaces even when we don't want to because the migraine is high, or because I need to take an insulin injection for someone who is diabetic. So I think we're all guilty
That's
of
where
that.
the social conditioning comes in, because we kind of feel that nobody's going to understand migraine
Absolutely.
as a problem because it is invisible.
How many times have you had a headache at work?
Yeah,
Yes.
all of
And
us.
said, you know what, it's okay, it's just a headache, I'll
Correct,
be fine.
correct.
And because it's always very hard to convince even your colleagues or your superiors to say, I have a headache, I need to go back home. It's very hard to do that. And our workspaces do not necessarily enable that a whole lot, right? I mean, there's a lot of mental health conversation that started now post COVID. But that's also a very hard one to convince anybody else for. And very often even managers and supervisors are guilty of calling that out as an excuse to not perform, or
Yeah.
laziness,
Right,
Yes.
rather than a cry for help.
Right. And interestingly, Pooja, this author goes on and says that because one of the colleagues could not believe that, this person is having migraine. So this person came this close just to check her breath if she's drunk or not. But she was actually having migraine. So, that is the conditioning. People don't believe that you can have something like, because it's invisible.
Because also we are grown up. I mean, it's also when you tell your children, it's okay, it's a little pain, it's okay, it'll go away, get up, start moving, get your act together, right? I mean, children are studying in the middle of exams, they haven't gotten proper sleep, and it's okay. It'll make you stronger, it'll make you harder, it'll help you. You're sort of pushing people. And it's very hard to be able to find that right balance, right? Because you need to push people. You need to sort of push people to be able to get to their best selves. But you also need to understand there's a point where people need that help and they need to focus on their health more than anything else. Not all organizations or schools or education institutions factor that in, right? So that's a big problem.
Pooja, you talked about accessibility to healthcare. Now, there are certain healthy choices that are accessible and they're up to us. So, for example, on the days I go to my workplace, somebody has cut a fruit for me and packed it for me, and therefore I ensure that I'm eating one fruit a day. But the days I don't have work, I know that fruit is important for me. At least one fruit a day is something I should consume. But I don't make the effort of opening the refrigerator and cutting and peeling that fruit for
Oh
myself.
yeah, I totally resonate with that. I'm guilty as well.
We all do
Yes,
that, yeah?
yes.
So, how can we as individuals overcome this reluctance of taking care of ourselves?
Well, that's a very hard one. We all know we need to exercise. We all need to. We all know smoking is bad for health. We all know alcohol is bad for health. We all know this. These are there's enough science, enough research, enough information.
Correct.
We all know amla is good for health, right? It's not the most delicious eating thing, right? So what do? You coat it with sugar and you eat it, right? Point really is that there is science and there is facts, and then there is human behavior. And human behavior, we all know human beings are not as rational as we would like to believe. We are emotional people. We are lazy,
We are.
Tell me, I mean, okay, if I was to say, you have to go from here to say a kilometer away, and you have a choice of car or a bike or walking, right? You'd prefer the car. Who's going to get up and walk? I mean, we are lazy. We
Yeah.
don't want to put in the effort. There's enough data points and research around how we prefer the lazy options, because it's easy to do that. I mean, if I was a lion and you gave me like a kill every day, why would I run and chase and catch my prey, right? So the point is, wherever we can find easy excuses to not put in the effort, we tend to do that. The ones who don't are the ones who become your Olympic champions and the ones who become your, superstars. Why? Because there is discipline. I mean, everybody speaks about Virat Kohli and his food discipline. It's hard. It's hard to do that. We've all seen his diet chart. How many of us can emulate that?
Not
Tough,
me,
yeah.
for sure.
So the point really is, like you said, well, somebody provides that to you and it's sort of on a platter, it's much easier to actually do that particular action. But when it requires a certain degree of effort, in our own heads, we are trying to sort of figure out whether is it worth it getting out of the bed and walking that distance and then washing that fruit with cold water and then peeling and cutting it. Who's going to do all of that?
Especially
Let
in
me just say-
winters.
Especially in
Exactly.
winters,
So you
absolutely.
just so
Yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah.
How do you change that behavior? Now that was an interesting question that you asked. And behavior change really is it's slow. It need a lot of it is coming from inside of you, but also you have what is called there's a lot of theory and frameworks around what is easy to do, what is simple to do, what is timely. Like if I'm able to, for example, right at the moment that you're stepping into the house, you put maybe a coat hanger right there. It's much easier for you to then hang your coat there than if it were somewhere inside, because by that time you would dump it on the sofa or something else, right? So little things that enable, because things are right there. Impulse purchase is exactly that, right? You're standing at the counter, you're making the payment, suddenly you see this little chocolate pop-ups. Hey, why not I have a chocolate today? I deserve it. I did a good job, right? So a lot of this is about how do you make certain behaviors easy. And a lot of the private sector does that. A lot of design of, say, departmental stores or even websites is essentially following a lot of the behavioral nudges and frameworks to steer you in the direction of certain actions, whether right or not. One can always debate that. But creating a certain propensity or a certain ask or a certain need can be done to be able to steer people in the right kind of, towards the right kind of behaviors. Now, if you take the example of COVID, there's a lot of fear. So fear was a big driver. And how did that fear happen? Because there's a lot of science, a lot of facts, a lot of data that was coming to us on a daily basis. that sort of steered us into the direction of the behavior of wearing masks or washing hands, right? We were washing groceries coming into the house before they actually entered the house. We were told, wash them, keep them outside for a few hours before you bring them inside the house. And we started doing that because fear was a big driver of that behavior. Right? So it's very emotional typically. Your behavioral drivers are much more emotional than rational. But I think it'll take like a separate long session to discuss behavior
Pooja,
science in
you talked
detail.
about fear being a driver to steer our behaviors in a healthier way. What could be some positive motivators for people to adopt good, healthy choices?
A lot of them. Pride.
Pride, okay.
I think
Pride.
Swachh Bharat is a good example.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, pride is a big driver. You're wanting to showcase yourself. For example, I mean, if you look at Instagram and Facebook, I mean, the whole element of wanting likes, wanting to look good, wanting to fit in, the need to be seen as one of, the key actors. A lot of these end up pushing you into those kind of behaviors. So I'm not somebody who clicks pictures of food before consuming it, but I see people around me doing that and I want to fit in because my friends behave like that. So I'll say, you know what? I'll also start doing. It's not so hard. It's not so difficult. I'll also click a picture. I'm not one who actually uses filters, but suddenly I see, hey, you know what? It makes everybody look better. So, okay, I'll also learn this, right? So, your drivers can be different kinds of emotional reactions or emotional needs that can actually push you in certain directions. Understanding that, and which is what a lot of organizations do, is a very key element of a lot of sales and purchase behaviors, etc. And there's lots of research and lots of studies and a lot of content around that that's sitting out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Pooja, I'm going to jump to some numbers. I have, a report over here. This is the report by Global Food Policy 2024, which says that 38% of Indians consume junk food, which is primarily fried food and processed food. Then there is another report, that is the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey of 2023, which says that top 5% of urban households spend about rupees 538 per month on purchasing processed food and, packaged food. Do you think a lot of this increase is also because of the food aggregator apps who've made it more accessible and convenient for people to access junk food?
They have a role to play, right? Now, if you were to look at, for example, what was, say, the consumption of outdoor food, restaurant food, non-home cooked meals, pre these food aggregator apps or food delivery apps versus now, you would see a difference, right? The number of restaurants that have opened up or the number of people who are enabled to actually provide that service has definitely gone up, because that's what happens, right? The ecosystem starts to gravitate towards what is actually being demanded of by the audiences. Now, one could say that there is definitely a genuine demand for non-home cooked food, right? Because, so for example, if I'm a student living in a paying guest accommodation, or if I'm a single person, have moved to a different city for work and I have long working hours, I need that support. I need, I need to be able to quickly dial in and get food for myself. So there is a justification, relatively explainable justification for that behavior. But then if I am living at home with parents, or if I can cook myself, I'm a grown-up adult who has access to maybe cooking capabilities and I can chop and cook, etc. myself, and I continue to order from the outside, then that's an element of laziness that comes in, right? Or maybe, celebration is equal to food from outside. You've also been conditioned, right? Where, let's all go together and eat outside. So parties have to be outside. A lot of this is social conditioning, marketing, creating those happy moments are only when a birthday cake that comes from a particular bakery is the only one that marks this occasion. Otherwise, it's not good enough. So a lot of that is social pressure and conditioning. A lot of that is marketing. Of course, we all see all of this around us all the time and they look good. The photography is good, the imagery is good, the food is delicious, of course. So therefore, the propensity to sort of gravitate towards that goes up. And you actually rightly said convenience, right? If it's convenient for me to do, the probability of me doing it is far greater. Now, if I was to, for example, compare banks, right? Private sector banks versus, say, some of the government sector banks, right? You might find that the private sector banks make it more convenient to open a bank account, transact on certain kinds of actions. Your apps make it easy to actually transfer money, deposit money, things like that. Digital payments has taken away all the cash load that we used to carry. So it's far more easier to spend money, right? Which is great. But if you were to get back and do the math and say, you know what, if I had 100 rupees, maybe I used to spend 70 and save 30 because I had that money in hand. But today, if I have 100 rupees, because I don't have that cash in hand, I end up spending 90 without even realizing it because I'm not, actually handing out cash. I know someone who actually once said that I don't use a credit card. And I'm like, who doesn't use a credit card? Of course you should use a credit card. It's so convenient, right? He said, no, because if I don't hand out the cash myself, I don't know how much money I'm spending. And a credit card, typically, it's designed
To make
To
you
make you
spend,
spend
to make
more.
you spend
yes.
more.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the convenience of a lot of this, whether it's technology, whether it's new tools and products, does push you in that direction and does enable that behavior far greater than the absence of that. So in many ways, I guess, new technology tools that are actually big markers for our development and are enabling us to do so much more also have this element of pushing you unintentionally sometimes in this direction. So therefore, for you to be able to balance that out becomes super important.
But in the same context, I mean, the technology can also then push us towards healthier food choices.
That's a choice that you need to make yourself.
The
right?
individual
You
needs
have
to
the
make.
options.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to open a food delivery app today, it'll show you healthy foods and it'll show you the puris and the chola bhaturas, right?
Right.
It's for you to decide what to pick up.
Right.
Knowing pretty well then that's healthy and it's marked as healthy or eco-friendly choices, sustainable choices, all of that is available today and very clearly marked out, and there's definitely a lot of focus and effort to propagate that as well, right? How many of us are actually putting in the effort to do that? I'll give you another simple example of e-waste, right? I mean, we all have batteries or old laptops and chargers and things that we have to get rid of, right? There is a proper system already in place. There are people who are willing to actually come to your home and take the e-waste, right? For taking out scrap, for recycling, all of that. Just how many of us put in the effort to say, you know what, let's segregate the e-waste?
We don't.
Composting.
Yeah.
I know a friend, and I'm like in awe of her, who actually told me, there is no kitchen waste that goes out of that I throw away. And I said, how? What do you do? She says, every weekend, all of the peels and the foods and all of that, she said, I put a little water and grind them, make into a slurry, and put it on all my plants.
Wow.
Wow.
It's fantastic. It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It requires effort. And it requires some degree of, okay, I'm going to create a container or a space where I'll collect all of this, and then some degree of time and resources spent over the weekend to create that slurry. But it's a very smart thing to do. I've been wanting to do it. I haven't done it. Right?
It's a choice at the end of the day.
Exactly. These are choices that we can make, right? What do I prioritize? That extra hour of sleep or making that slurry? And
A trade-off.
Can we be nudged to make the right choices?
of course, the nudges are around us, right? The nudges are, like I said, in the impulse purchases. The nudges are in as much in like the apple that's cut and get delivered to you, right? What do parents do very typically when children are not eating healthy foods, right? You'll hide it up, or you'll actually sort of coat it in something. So a lot of this, like I gave you the example of the amla and the sugar, right? You want to give the amla, which is a fabulous thing. It's good to have, but you actually coat it in something which is sweeter, so that the consumption goes up, right?
Yeah, the mommies making pizzas out of rotis.
Oh yeah, and so we are sort of, the only challenge really is are we getting the right kind of inputs as well? Because very often we get carried away by a lot of marketing lingo. But if we were to actually put in the effort, a lot of these are available to us. For the longest time, my father used to tell my daughter, he used to give her chocolate to eat because she would hear as a little baby, like chocolate is, all children share chocolates. But he would actually give her the amla candy and call it chocolate. It's only when she got like, she was at 10, 11 years old, so she said, you know what, somebody's
I've
been
been
making a
fooled.
fool out of me.
Trust
always,
issues.
right? But yeah, so it's about
Good.
what you condition your children with.
Right, right. Pooja, I'm gonna divert the conversation a little bit into the misconceptions and myths around food choices. For example, many of us, we convince ourselves about and justify ourselves about certain unhealthy choices. For example, we assume that brown bread is better than the regular bread or the white bread. Atta Maggi is better than the regular Maggi, or let's say it's good to have muesli, packaged muesli in breakfast. And deep down, we all know that these could be just myths. They could not be, it's not backed by science. So, what can we do to, get ourselves out of these myths, educate ourselves? And you are someone who comes from a social service background. Is this concept a very capitalist concept that brown bread is better than white bread or atta Maggi is better than the regular Maggi? Is it a capitalist concept? Where are these misconceptions originating from?
So, like I said earlier, there's a whole lot of marketing machinery sitting at the back of this, trying to create a lot of perceptions. The only way out of a lot of the information coming to you and you sort of forming your opinions on the basis of that information is awareness and education, right? If you're picking up a packet of atta Maggi versus a normal Maggi, read the ingredients. The government has rules, there are laws in place to say you have to specify what goes inside, what's the amount of protein, calcium, carbohydrates, sugars, etc., that are derived from the products that are being sold. Read it, because when you read it is when you realize that, you know what, it's not as great as it looks or as it's being advertised. If you put in a little bit of effort to actually understand what is it that you're buying and consuming, I think you will start to make good choices by yourselves. So, for example, you said muesli or you said atta bread. When I buy ketchup, when my household consumes a lot of tomato ketchup, if you look at a lot of tomato ketchup packets, they're about 30 to 35% sugar, right? Now, you start to look at different brands and then you actually find something which is 10, 11% sugar versus 35% sugar. Maybe you don't like the taste at first, which is really where you have to make that change consciously, right? You shift from wheat rotis to say oat rotis or bajra rotis, or all of this is available. We know this. It's a lot of this information has actually been passed on to us from our grandparents
yes.
and parents as well. It's us. We have to make the choice. I have to get up in the morning, wear my sports shoes and go for a run. Nobody else will run for me, right? I have to stop myself from eating that second laddu or that second samosa, even the first one, if I can help it, right? So those choices are ours to make. Sometimes the conditions around us make it hard to make those right choices. And the ability to actually distinguish there is your education and awareness.
You said that the conditions around us make it hard to, make the right choice. I want to quote an example over here. So there is this chain of coffee shop that's located in Singapore, and Singapore has very stringent rules and regulations in terms of what is being offered for consumption, and sugar levels are particularly lower in coffees found in that country in comparison to other countries. What they do is a mandatory labeling. So if the sugar content is very high, there has to be a red colored label, which kind of signals people to stop, so they would know. You're making it very easy for them to get access to
Identify.
information and therefore make more mindful choices in terms of what you consume.
That's
and
beautiful.
I think that is something
And that
that
is
can be done at a
doable. That
social
is
level.
doable.
That's very doable. So you now have, for example, I remember growing up not seeing the green dot and the red dot between vegetarian and non-vegetarian foods, right? It came up, right? And it makes it very easy to understand, right? I'm a vegetarian, but I can make those choices much more easy because then I can see if something has egg or not, right? Because the marks are, so you have to create markers that are easy to understand, much like when you're driving on the road. You see those traffic signals, those signs that are there. If there's a bend or there's a sharp bend or a sharp curve or men at work and things like that are there. So there are visual clues that you can give because textual clues, and expecting people to read a lot is also expecting them to put in a lot of effort. So, however, like I had said earlier, if you make it easy, if you make it really convenient, then it's the probability of that action happening goes up significantly, right? But if, for example, you buy a chocolate and the writing is really small, yeah, you're making it slightly harder for people to read, right? Now, if I need to, I'm actually shopping, I'm at a supermarket store, and this is an impulse purchase maybe, and I'm just standing there and I'm saying, you know what, let me just quickly check how much sugar there is. But to do that, I have to take out my glasses, manage the stuff that I'm carrying, and I'm like, you know what, forget it, let me just buy it. Right? So we all know that this is how we end up behaving. This is how the predominant reaction or predominant behavior is. So if you have to genuinely enable people, then you have to make the right kind of provisions to make it easy for them. Otherwise, yeah, it's very easy to pop in a pill. Like if I had a conversation once with someone who said um, this was about anemia and low iron content, and I said, you know what, you should eat more spinach. You give all those the good foods, and this person said, no, but if I can pop a pill, it's far more easier than for me to eat spinach every day. Instant gratification, right? It's easier to have pop a pill than to actually eat healthy food, and that's dangerous. That's very, very dangerous.
Also, could be more trust on the medicines than our home remedies, which could be like spinach for anemia.
Medicines, I would say actually it's not medicines versus home remedies. It's probably more about the longevity. Because if I have to eat palak every day, I have to eat palak every other day.
The result is slower, maybe.
It's a slow burn. It's going to take its time, right? As against popping a pill and saying, you know what, I'm okay, right? When you plant a tree, it's going to take those many years to fruit. It needs the time. And we have to be patient about that, right? So that's the thing, right? When you understand the fact that things, the ones that take time for the right reasons, give them that time and attention and be patient. But we are talking to a generation that's expecting instant gratitude for everything. Instant coffee, instant likes. The minute you put a picture and after 5 minutes you check how many likes, after 10 minutes you check again, right? That's our behavior now. And that's definitely not helping us being more patient and being willing to wait.
Right. Pooja, since you just mentioned that in a way good things, they take time. If you plant a seed now, it's going to take its own time to turn up into a beautiful tree. So when we talk about if we draw a parallel in a country like Japan, they have this beautiful food education system called Shokiku, and they have instilled healthy food choices right from the very formative years in their kids. And as a result, if you pick a kid in Japan, high chances that he or she would say broccoli is my favorite food. However, in India, if you pick a kid, high chances they would say Coke, French fries, burgers. So, since we are accepting that behaviors become much more sticky when such behaviors are instilled in the formative years, do you think that a model like Shokiku is replicable, or at least we can try to replicate this in India? If yes, what are the challenges that you foresee that they could come our way?
I think it's a great opportunity to learn from what best practices we are seeing from around the globe. And yes, absolutely, conditioning at a young age essentially helps make that behavior more sticky and more embedded. I'll give you an example. My father was a refugee. My father was born in Lahore, and during the partition, they all moved to India, and they were given a small refugee room in Old Delhi area. So my grandmother her neighbor, I mean, you had these one room hutman sort of rooms, right? The neighbor was a lady who was a doctor at that time. I'm talking about 1947. And my grandmother became great friends with her. So this lady, because she was a doctor, she had a huge amount of focus on hygiene. And she actually educated my grandmother about hygiene a lot. To the extent that, you know, my grandmother became very particular about washing everything and the way food was cooked, and also she didn't leave anything to chance. Now, my father at that time was 3-4 years old. So he saw his mother. There was a lot of conditioning in the house around hygiene because that was something that they saw around them, especially in a refugee camp where things probably were not as hygienic overall, right? 20, 30, 40 years later, my dad continued to be extremely focused on health, on hygiene. So everything would be washed in our house, everything, every single time. So you would wash the plates and keep them. And before serving food, you would wash the plates again and serve. But, you know, things like that. To the extent that we used to joke in the house that, you know, if we have a guest coming in, my father would first wash him or her down before letting them enter the house. But that's the thing, right?
That's conditioning.
Conditioning at a young age sticks, which is why, you know, you teach your children, for example, if a child has learned sport at a young age, they never forget that, right? If you learn cycling at a young age, you will never forget it, even if you're not in the habit of doing that. I've been trying to learn to swim for the past 5-6 years. I'm just not able to figure it out. If I had learned it when I was a child, I would have, you know, it would have stuck, right? So things like that. So when you condition at a younger age, it becomes easier for that to become second nature. And of course, it's doable. Why not, right? I mean, you see a whole lot of, you know, school systems where when you talk about sharing food, when you talk about sitting together and you have these, you know, group circle sort of activations, team building, working together in teams, listening to others, all of that we teach our children as part of the schooling system. So we can definitely do that for food habits as well. But, you know, you have to do the same thing at school and at the household level. Very often, when a baby is not having food, you end up mixing sugar and giving. You say, you know what, oh, you know, and then we pride ourselves in saying, oh, you know, he or she is very fond of sweets. That's wrong, right? Because it's harder for us to feed the baby non-sweet food. It requires more effort, requires more time. So we end up mixing the sugar and, you know, the same reason where you see a lot of parents handing over a mobile phone or an iPad to children while they're feeding them. And then we say, you know what, oh, my 1.5-year-old can swipe on the iPad. They're so smart.
Right.
I mean, we are.
They take a lot of pride in that.
Who are we convincing about this, right? So
right.
it's us. The problem is us. You know, between feeding a baby milk with a milk bottle versus a katori chammach, right? A katori chammach is far harder, will take much longer time, much slower, will spill more probably. But if you were to ask a doctor, they would always say, you know what, katori chammach is better than even a sterilized bottle milk, right? So it requires time and effort. It requires us to be patient as much as, you know, if we expect our children to learn those
So
values.
Pooja, I think then, you know, all the stakeholders have a role to play. Schools, communities, households, to
Absolutely.
enable this change.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Pooja. Thanks, Atan. Your inputs are, you know, they'll stay with us, our viewers, for very, very long.
Thank
you,
you so much.
Pooja.
This
Thank
was a
you.
lovely conversation.
Thank you.
myself.
Thank you,
Thank
Pooja,
you.
for joining us. Both me and Dr. Tavleen thoroughly enjoyed the conversation,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure our audience did too. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Do let us know in the comment section what other aspects of human behavior would you like us to cover in the upcoming episodes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.